Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today. And on behalf of the Institute for African Women in Law, I welcome you to this panel on women lawyers in human rights and humanitarian law. Today, our panel kickstarts the Institute's Women in Leadership series as part of the Leadership Academy in partnership with GIZ, aimed at curating discussions and power chats with distinguished women in law across Africa and in the diaspora. I think you will all agree with me that obviously women leaders have a unique perspective and many know how to inspire future women leaders. My name is Satang Nabaneh. I am from the Gambia. I am the Director of Programs at the University of Dayton's Human Rights Center and a research professor of law. I will be the moderator for this panel, so that's an easy job for me. I'll just be the one just facilitating this very inspiring and fantastic panel. But before we go into that, I just wanted to quickly give you a format, give you an idea of the format for the panel. So we'll take a few moments to introduce our distinguished panelists, and then I'll kick off the conversation with some few questions. And then the last part will open up the floor, I suppose the virtual floor, to give you an opportunity to also ask questions to our panelists as well. So do please use the Q&A section to ask your questions. But we also do want to ask you to also let us know where you're from. Please do share your name, where you're joining us from, as well as one thing that you will also want to get out of this discussion. We do appreciate you being here with us as well. We also encourage you to share key messages from our panelists on social media. Do kindly tag the Institute when you do so. At this point, it gives me great honor to introduce our distinguished panelists. First, we have Ms. Osai Ojigho from Nigeria. She is the country director of Amnesty International, Nigeria. Second, we have Dr. Renifa Madenga from Zimbabwe. She is a gender and humanitarian specialist with Juniper Consultancy in the US. And lastly, we have Ms. Wede Kekuleh from Liberia. She is a legal counsel on gender, human rights, and corporate law at the Central Law Offices in Liberia. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to our distinguished panelists for taking the time to join us today for this fantastic panel on women lawyers in human rights and humanitarian law, where we will share the unique experiences and perspectives of women that are working within this particular context. Our discussion will center on issues of women's access to justice, transitional justice, conflict and cause lawyering, as well as maintaining physical, mental, emotional well-being in such volatile environments. To kickstart the conversation, I would like to turn to Osai, given your extensive experience and the fact that you have visited about 30 countries in your career and have over 17 years of experience in the NGO world. Your commitment and experience in human rights protection, strengthening of the regional system, in particular the African human rights system, your advocacy against sexual and gender-based violence is evident in what you have done so far. So my question will be, what do we mean when one thinks about human rights within the context that you work in?
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be joining you today. And thanks to the Institute for African Women in Law for hosting this session. So when one thinks about human rights, what comes to mind is a body of laws, principles, values that protect the humanity and the existence of life with human beings, simply put. In more practical terms, we can sum it with one word. It's about human dignity. So your dignity as a person. So despite the fact that we have several treaties at international level, one thing that is important to stress is that human rights is something that is natural to you, just because you're a human. So whether it's rights to life, personal liberty, fair hearing, freedom of expression, freedom from discrimination, right to education, to food, to work, to peace, these are things that come to you naturally because you exist as a human being. And I have a favorite quote from Professor Wangari Maathai, the late environmentalist and 2004 Nobel Peace Prize awardee. She said, human rights are those things that are put on the table for people to enjoy. And then you fight for it and then you protect it. And that is why the ability of people to protest, to sue the government at national and regional level, and to petition international treaty bodies is key in order for all of us to be able to enjoy our rights and to protect it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osai, for that brief but comprehensive overview of what human rights is. And as she said, human rights is about human dignity, I think, which is a central piece of what we mean when we talk about human rights and the need for protecting such rights. And as she said, you know, that varies in terms of all the human rights that we have. And now I would like to turn to Dr. Renifa. On a total opposite side, not a total opposite, but on the opposite side, you have been a public prosecutor and magistrate at the domestic level, but then you've also worked at the international level, including at the ICTR as an attorney before working now as an expert in your current position. Can you share with us what is humanitarian law and what is the connection with gender?
Thank you very much. In its very simple terms, international humanitarian law is the law relating to war, in the sense that it regulates relationship between states, between international organizations, and also between the people who are affected by the war. So we can say it's the law of the war. It also has principles in addition to just regulating hostilities. It has bounds and limits. People can actually say, how can people sit down and actually prepare for a war by preparing a law? War should not be inevitable. There should be diplomacy. But when it's necessary to go to war, there should be bounds and limitations, particularly for those people, firstly, who did not make the decision to go to war, people who are civilians, different categories of people. They might be boys or girls, men or women. Then this is very interconnected to gender, because we know that people, different genders have also different concerns, they have different fears, they have different aspirations. So from a gender perspective, it's interconnected, that if decisions are made and they are going to affect people differently, those people should participate. They should also be protected. I just don't want to end up in a war I didn't decide, then I'm raped left, right, and center. So it also goes with the conflict-related sexual violence and other violations which Osai is actually related to. If I want the right to participate in politics, then I find myself running away because now we have a war, I'm being raped. I'm no longer enjoying those rights. But the point of departure now between the normal human rights and international humanitarian law, it kicks out or kicks on once there is a war. And it's also regulated by principles, the principle of distinction, the principle of proportionality, and also the principle of necessity. So I'll dwell later on distinction, because it's also very interrelated to human rights and very practical in terms of why do we end up being affected by a war we did not ask for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rene, for that. And I think especially within the current climate that we find ourselves, obviously human rights and humanitarian law is as important as it ever should be. And I think, you know, our next speaker also sits very nicely at the interconnectedness and the interlinkages between human rights and humanitarian law. And Ade, my question especially focused on the way that you navigate the complexities of working in the area of human rights and humanitarian law, I think will be useful for this particular discussion. Obviously, we know that the consequences of the civil war in Liberia with respect to human rights in any country, in Liberia, in any country cannot be overlooked. But particularly in Liberia, we know that, there has been conflict in Liberia in the past. And with your background in human rights, as well as specializing in peace and conflict, how have you navigated the complexities of working in the area of both human rights and humanitarian law? Ade, you need to unmute. Thank you. It's still on mute.
This own entry cases, yeah. In that you realize at the same time they have those difficulties, because most of them, if you come from war, you have women who have suffered the trauma of war, you have men who have suffered the trauma of war. Some of them have been raped, others have been made to stand there while their parents, their family members are being murdered before their eyes. And for many of them, they still carry that trauma. The war happened years and years ago, more than 10 years ago, but people still bear that trauma of and for some of them, what they carry is guilt. From talking to them, you feel that they feel guilty that it is their family members that were killed and they are alive. So they carry that sort of a guilt that they don't deserve to be alive because of that. So for us to navigate those complexities, what we've tried doing is that while it is true we had a truth and reconciliation process where some of them were even opportune to be able to talk to go to the TRC and be able to tell their stories, what we realized is that after the process, they were just like left alone. I mean, while it's true that they did tell their stories at the TRC, they needed to be followed up on. I mean, yes, they told their stories, but they still carry that trauma. So what we tried doing is setting up an organization called Survivors Truths, where we give them the opportunity to sit with other people, tell their stories, because we realize that once people talk about their issues, they feel better. It's not solving the problem, but it lets you know that, look, it's not your fault. You're not the only one who's been through this. Other people have been through this and they're surviving. In Liberia, we say they are trying to be all right together. So we realized that it has solved some problems for some people who were already giving up on life. Some of them were either, I mean, brave enough to tell us that sometimes they think about killing themselves. Now they're able to get into sustainable livelihoods and move forward with their lives, have children, have families. So we realize that, yes, that is one way we're going through the complexities, while at the same time, we still are pushing for the establishment of a war and economic crime squad in Liberia, because we think the culture of impunity in this country has to end. Our children who are coming up have to know that you don't just walk on other people, you don't just murder people and walk away with it and just say you're sorry. I mean, yes, we're doing reconciliation, but people have to answer to their crimes so that our children, our generations to come will know that when you do wrong, when you violate another man's rights, you get punished for it. Where in Liberia, we say where your rights end is exactly where the next man's rights begin. So those are some of the things we're trying to do. And hopefully we think that one day there will be a one economic crime squad where people will learn to basically respect one another's rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ade, for giving us a snapshot of the complexities of working in the area of human rights and humanitarian law, especially within the context of Liberia, which is still dealing with post-conflict. And I think, some of the examples that you shared in terms of the work that you're doing, I think can very much be adapted by other countries, especially within the African continent, including the Gambia, that is not particularly dealing with post-conflict, but that is currently undertaking, for instance, transitional justice processes within the transition from an authoritarian regime to a democratic one. So thank you very much for that. And I would now like to circle back to Osai in terms of, I know that you gave us a brief snapshot of what human rights is, and especially within the context that you work in in Amnesty International, but prior as well with your experience in the African continent, that what are some of the core issues and challenges that women human rights lawyers like yourself face working in such a volatile environment?
Thanks so much, Dr. Satang. In the first place, just to situate the kinds of environments that I've worked in. When we talk about volatile environments, we mean places where there's unrest or difficult environments, such as in Nigeria, where unfortunately in the last few years, we've seen a falling in rating in terms of the World Press Freedom Index, the Fragile States Index, as well as the Civicus Freedom Index, which now rates Nigeria as a repressed country because of draconian laws or the inability to prosecute perpetrators of human rights violations successfully. And so, as a woman lawyer, the first challenge that you face is about people taking you seriously. We live in a very patriarchal society and very traditional too, that sees women as people to be looked after. So when they see a woman lawyer who is enforcing the rights of others or is a representative of an international organization like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International, and is advocating for the implementation of laws, treaties, and the like, who is on the news, in the media, challenging authorities for their failure to act, and who demands accountability from multinational corporations and governments, they consider it quite strange and unusual. Therefore, the first reaction of many people is resistance, like, who is she? What is she doing here? When they say they were looking for the best man for the job, they were expecting a man. So there's this resistance because they cannot relate with a woman who has been, in their mind, is someone to be looked after and should not be dealing with tough issues. The second challenge is within your own organization. So women in leadership, particularly Black women, heading institutions, especially those that are traditionally not, not headed by women, are relatively new compared to when these organizations have been in existence. So there's a tendency to want to be sure that this person knows what they are doing, and it can be quite frustrating because you've been doing this for several years. Like for me, for example, you've been doing this for over 18 years. You have the qualifications, you have the experience, you have built extensive networks locally, nationally, and globally. Yet you're constantly being assessed by your peers, subordinates, and bosses all the time. This can be baffling because it's a constant circle of people second guessing you, like asking you to give reasons why you took a decision, trying to convince you to take another position by asking whether you have checked this or done that, because you're the one experiencing it. It is sometimes very hard to explain to others how this bias is coming up in the workplace or in the kinds of questions they ask you, and that how the manner and approach they use negatively impacts the review of your work. So this then increases your own stress because you're constantly alert about being extra prepared in order to respond to all the questions that they might throw your way. So you never know what they're going to bring on board. So you just prepare extra just in case. So another challenge I see is the fact that when you're at leadership level, it's quite lonely. It's very difficult for you to find others that you can speak with on a peer-to-peer level and who understand some of the challenges that it takes to run an office, manage people, how to deal with day-to-day bias that you face. And this is why spaces like the Institute for African Women in Law really provide safe spaces where you can find women like yourself to support, but also to give you insights into what you're going through using their own different perspectives. It kind of reassures you that you're not alone. And conversing with another woman leader in a similar position is quite priceless. And then when it's another woman lawyer who has a requisite experience and is in a position that can understand your own challenges, then having that sharing is actually invaluable. One more challenge I can speak to would be at the personal level, because even though you're a lawyer doing your work, you also have a life. And sometimes because of the demands of the job, you find that you could struggle, especially if you have young children or you're looking after elderly parents and you have other responsibilities outside of work. There's a tendency for our nurturing side to sometimes lead to feelings of guilt or being inadequate. So for me, it's really important to have a supportive partner if you are married or in a relationship, and that you can create time and space for your personal things, including putting things in your schedule so that you do not forget. And this can help also in balancing, your responsibilities at work and at home. I would say that it's a lot easier for me now that my kids are older, but it's really about the kinds of supports that you have around you. And what I tell people is, one way is to get people and family and friends that can help, but even paid help is possible, and you shouldn't be ashamed for putting your kids in nursery or having a nanny or a babysitter in order for you to be able to have your career, have your home, and pursue your personal hobbies and interests. So I think it's very critical that women should not feel guilty about pursuing what gives them joy and interests them. And one advice that I got that I think is really useful is you cannot be 100% all the time in all the different roles that you represent: wife, mother, boss, colleague, chorister, friend, or whatever. And giving yourself the permission to be present and to be free of this need to be perfect 100% in all of these roles has a lot to do with freeing you from stress and allowing you to enjoy the moment and the things that you need to do. So sometimes it's about just letting them know at work that you need to be able to sort out some things for yourself at home, and also for your family to understand when they need to give you space and time to be, really focus on work because you really need to deal with certain things. The key to achieving this is communication, self-awareness, and the ability to negotiate effectively. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Osai. You've given us quite a lot. And I think, with the challenges that you shared as well, I am sure that all of the panelists, including myself, share those. There are shared challenges as well as all the folks that are joining us from Uganda to Nigeria to Zimbabwe and thank you all. We're looking through and we're seeing where you're joining us from. And I'm sure that the challenges that Osai shared as well, resonates with quite a lot of us with regard to that. And just a quick reminder that you can put and share your questions in the Q&A as well. And just Osai, just to pick up one thing that you said, and I think this is really important, especially this idea around having, colleagues, especially at the same level, that you can share shared challenges as well as use it as an opportunity for co-learning. And I think this is where really, especially in terms of opening the door for other women to join, as well as mentoring those that I imagine as well, just to create more, ensuring that space open up for more women to be at leadership positions as well. But I also think more importantly as well that women leaders like yourself, despite the challenges, also bring in something new to the position and bring something new, especially in terms of cultural shift, as you said, with regard to leadership positions as well. So thank you for sharing that as well. And just turning to Dr. Renifa, we know that your career spanning from both the domestic level to the international level obviously brought contacts for you with regard to close contact with individuals who obviously need their rights respected and protected. And I'm wondering though whether there have been any situations, for instance, where you have not been recognized as capable because you're a woman, because of your femininity, and how you have handled such situations.
Thank you very much. Indeed, the challenges pointed by Osai, I will just incorporate them because they also relate in a very significant and material way to my life, to my career. In terms of your very important question, I actually want to answer it from a very operational point of view. Most of the challenges came because of the area I chose. You referred to the experience within the domestic arena. As a girl aspiring to be a lawyer, there were so many obstacles. So when I did law, I thought, okay, we are going somewhere. But when I started to work as a lawyer, as a prosecutor in my own jurisdiction, I was so disillusioned because the law was structured in such a way that as much as you want to even help other people, because gender is about boys, girls, men and women, but the socially constructed issues were obstacles in the sense that I was very ambitious. When I started prosecution, I actually thought I would also even apply the gender issues in things like accessibility. But then it was the way the law was structured at national jurisdiction. I actually thought this law was never meant to transform women or girls. So that is why I quickly went through the whole ranks up to regional magistrate. Then I decided I'm now going to civil society, because at the bench we're applying a law which was not working. So when I went to civil society, I was now lobbying for laws. But the laws were at a certain legal framework which still did not accommodate women and girls. So I decided, you know what, let me go to the international arena. That is where things happen. So I left Zimbabwe. I had actually been recommended to the High Court bench, but weighing the stakes, I say I would rather be in the international arena in order to impact women and girls. So I went as a case manager. The reason why I started at that level is that when I saw an advert saying that they wanted a case manager at the International Criminal Tribunal of Rwanda, I actually thought that's a very important job, because in my national jurisdiction, then managers were mainly men, white, and then their PECs allowances were very hefty. You would actually even expect, if you're a man, maybe a company wife or something, it's like not legally, but those were the times when there was a lot of sexual harassment. So when I arrived in the corridors of power in Tanzania, I was so disillusioned that a case manager is a glorified legal clerk. So that was the starting point. And I said, what? Okay, that's it. There I was, a woman with children to look after and a puppy. And I was thinking, this is not what I signed for. But then in terms of impacting people, people were not just seeing me as someone who is a lawyer who is starting at that level, because I had just gotten my diploma in women's law, master's in women's law. I'd also done a bit of postgraduate courses at the Rao Wallenbeck. I now had a completely different approach to law. I was going to interrogate the law. So when I started to interrogate the law, I thought, oh, why did I even come from Zimbabwe? Here, the law is not even supporting women. I was a glorified clerk coming weekends in order to read documents, and the documents were full of people who had been raped, conflict-related sexual harassment, sexual violence, but none of the indictments actually charged the people who raped about rape. So those were the times when people were also dealing with the akayeso. So what then interested me was the impact, the perception of women, then what was happening in terms of the impact. There I was as a case manager at the bench. There were people, including Judge Kekuleh. So now things started to change. It was like when you look at the law, you say, how can we use the law as a tool of transformation? So I actually say I found so many friends, in the sense that I was not the first woman pioneering that. As I went through piles and piles of documents, I saw that there were women before me. We had actually made suggestions about the law being used as a tool of transformation to address gender-specific issues, but nobody seemed to listen. So I added the voice to what the Mumbis from Kenya had said, what the Patricia Sellers had said, what the Judge Pillais were saying. I was loud and rude, which is not good, but I actually made my point that I think if we are going to talk of accessing justice, then we should also look at gender-specific issues. So it was a block building on other women. So when you're in that area, you have so many challenges. You are not only confronting patriarchy, you are not only confronting perceptions of other men, you are also confronting other lawyers' perspectives, because it was we should just work within the four corners of law. But the normative affecting ordinary people is more than the law. Because even if you look to the Geneva Conventions, the additional protocols, they don't specify protection for women or girls. They are so vague. So even when you want to apply it, you have to read it with something, amend it, annotate it. So it was like those challenges were fulfilled in the field, because when we started field work, I actually saw that the women were leaders in their own right. The way they told you their story is a way of a tool of transforming the law, so that how they interact with the law and how you interact with them actually brings such energy, cohesive approach, multi-sectorial. So I now had a lot of friends, but at different levels, because it was now the issue of transforming those victims of the April 1994 genocide from being victims. I was also a victim in the sense that I was coming in a system which did not recognize gender-specific crimes, yet I had left Zimbabwe in order to do so. And then they became survivors because we're able to sit down and actually empower them to come and testify in courts of law at an international level. And when they came, we thought we would teach these women about law. They taught us all about what law is all about, how it's structured, how it's male-dominated, how it was not even meant to apply to them. Because in the case of Rwanda, they wanted reparations. Their cows had been taken away. They could not reclaim the dead who had gone. But then the law was not helping them. So even when they looked like they're coming from abject poverty. Yet the people who had perpetrated the genocide were looking very well represented in court. I think a lot of progress has been made now with the International Criminal Court. But as a woman, those were the challenges I was facing. That when we say law, whose law are we talking about? Even the sources. What was it ever meant to protect everyone? The men, the women, the poor, the rich, the educated, the uneducated. So even the concept of law was the main challenge, a challenge which I had to interrogate, a challenge which I had to deconstruct and say, what are the interventions? So when I then left Rwanda and was now working with other dockets like South Sudan, the Boko Haram, ICC, Libya, it was still the same approach that when we say law, what do we mean? When we say protection, when we mean participation, because even the law just say women are protected. What's the notion of protection? Protected from who and which women? Because sometimes say the law is now protecting those who are wounded during the war. So when we talk of wounded people, if I've been gang raped by 27 people, because the latest, if you see some of the UN reports, the latest report on Ethiopia, there was a woman who was raped by 27 Eritrean men. So when you talk of protecting the injured, at national level, how do we protect it? At regional level, how do we protect it? At international level, how do we protect it? So it was now unpacking the issues of participation, the issues of protection. So that is what really kept me going, engaged. But as Osai said, it was like climbing and leaning on the shoulders of other strong women, dynamic women who pioneered the work. So it was just putting building blocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Renifa. I mean, I see both Osai as well as Ade, moving their heads. Obviously, we are all in agreement, as well as shared experiences with some of the issues that you raised within the context of the work that you do. I think particularly taking away from the last bit that you said is this idea around the fact that whilst international as well as regional human rights law, as well as international humanitarian law is important, that these laws in action is also important in terms of how they utilize, how we use them to ensure social change, how we use them to ensure the protection of all people, especially the most marginalized and vulnerable groups like women, girls, persons with disabilities, and others as well. Just to circle back before we jump into the Q&A, I would like to ask you all, and we can start with Ade. You can also, in addition, share a bit in terms of your challenges. What advice would you give to upcoming women who want to pursue sort of the career path that you've taken? What are some insights that you would like to share as well? We can start with Ade, and then we'll go to Osai, and then Dr. Renifa. Thanks.
Well, I can simply say, and I'm going to be very brief because I know all of us, and time of us is of the essence, and all of us have to say something about this. But To start, I'll simply say, you can do this. Yeah. We've not made up of extra flesh and blood. Yeah. It's not that we had some extra opportunities that other women didn't have. Even the wealthiest tell you the challenges, and you're like, what? With all that money, they still, yes, they still suffer challenges because they are women. So learn to tell yourself, I can do this. Is anything easy? No, nothing good comes easy. Yeah. But once you put your mind to it and you tell yourself, I can do this, other people have done it and they've succeeded. You see us, we are your examples. We've done it, we've succeeded. We've had challenges, yes, but we were able to overcome those challenges. So if we could do it, so can you. In fact, you can do it even better and even excel at it. So go for it, girls. Go for it, women. Thank you.
Thank you, Wede. Osai?
Yes, I was just smiling as my sister said, you can do it. I think for me, one critical thing that helped is you need to know what you're doing. You need to know your subject matter and be excellent in what you do. No one can contest that. So they can say everything, you're weak, you're this, you're that, but they can't contest that you know whatever it is that you do, and you do it well. And then also build your tribe of allies, mentors, coaches, and friends. When things get tough, their support will give you some comfort. It's also getting easier to be recognized for your contributions and achievements because, like Ade said, there have been other women ahead of us who have surmounted these hurdles, and they did so with dignity and confidence. And one thing I will share for those who are really introverted, because I'm a very reserved person as well, you know you still need to shine. So publicize your work. Don't wait for others to do that for you. And just be rest assured that you bring your own unique style and gifts, and that because girls and women like you belong there, you can do it as well. So own and occupy your space. Thank you.
Thank you, Osai. Just to reiterate, own and occupy your space. That is a key takeaway as well. Dr. Renifa, over to you.
Thank you. And three things, like Ade said, yes, you can do it. The second thing is like you do it with excellency and focus, because it can be very broad when we talk of human rights and international human rights, but find your niche, then focus on it and do it with passion. And the third thing is come as you are. Because most people, especially when I was young, I would say, I'm waiting to get my act together. So you'll find that it's either too early, because people say, what is such a young girl doing in helicopters? Then you'll find maybe it's, you are now like middle age. They say, instead of reproducing, what are you doing? You're pregnant and on a helicopter. I told you when I went to Rwanda, my other child was only 6 months, but we went together. So reproduction does not interfere with production. And thirdly, when I say come as you are, we are different. We are not a homogeneous group. Some are married, some are not married, some are black, some are white, but you have to create your own space and make your contribution, because now the norm is diversity. So when we say diversity, it's also according to age, according to geographical location, according to other diversified assets. So just bring it, and you'll find that you are going to arise and you are going to shine. Come as you are. There is space for you. If you don't find space, create it for yourself. Nobody is going to take it from you, because you do the best. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you for those amazing insights and advice. And I think it's really resonating with folks that have joined us. I mean, there's this one from Isabel talking about the fact that, about the advice to shine in spite of your personality, and how she's taking that up as a new mantra. So I think it's definitely resonating with folks that are joining us. And just to reflect on my own as well, just this idea around reproduction and how that should, in a sense, not stop your dream. I mean, I had to, in a quote, ship my son off to the Gambia to actually pursue my PhD. It came with a lot of guilt, obviously, as Osai said, but I think at the end of the day as well, I think it's this idea around living our full selves, pursuing our dreams, pursuing our passion. And I think at the end of the day, our kids will be better off knowing that their mothers, did the best that they could and lived a life that, is in service for social change, is in service for good. So I think they will understand at the end of the day if we disappear for like a year or so. At this point, I will we will jump into the Q&A. So please do still share your questions as well. But I also do a quick reminder to also say that please do complete the survey. The link has been shared in the chat as well to give us reflection and feedback on this event as well with regard to what we're discussing today with regard to women lawyers in human rights and humanitarian law. At this point, I will share the first question that we have from Florence, who is so excited to see a panel of Black women who are actually working in the space and from the continent. And then she said, I'm curious to know how the panelists approach the wideness of human rights law and humanitarian law, both as theoretical frameworks, as well as the geopolitics that are at play, as well as the politics of international organizations. How do you mediate this? That is, how do you sit with this whilst also acknowledging the obvious merits of human rights? Who wants to take this? Osai, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I can start first. I smiled to myself when I saw the question, really good question. I think I'll start with the first thing is, they're not used to seeing people that look like us, Black, African, in positions of decision-making. So there's a bit of, everybody tries to be welcoming, but you can see that they struggle, because they're used to giving advice to other people that look like us. So getting them comfortable that the fact that you are making decisions can be challenging, but understanding that it's because they're not used to it makes it easier for you to be assertive, because that's the only way you're going to be heard and that you're going to make your point made. I belong here and I'm going to make those decisions jointly with you. The other thing is I try as much as possible to bring elements of the African regional work even to this space. So when we quote ICCPR, I would also quote the African Charter. So when they say, oh, CEDAW said this, I would also quote the Maputo Protocol, just to show that we have regional treaties within the African context, which are international law and which are relevant. And I always use those means through which to also remind them that we must apply, yes, we are an international organization respecting international law, but we must apply it within the context and understanding of Africa, which is why I am also on the table so that international organizations can be relevant to the communities they serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Osai. Dr. Renifa or Wede, doesn't anybody want to jump in onto this question before I move to, we have several other questions as well that I will share as well.
Okay, so yeah. For me, what I think, to answer that question, you have to, and it's what we've noticed in our line of work. At first, we are just viewed as people who are just finding their way somewhere, yeah. But then later on, when you work with people who don't have our color, maybe because of the white, black, even though let me say I've never seen white or actually black people in my entire life when you take the context of color. But the thing is, they don't expect anything of you. They don't expect you to rise. They don't expect, because they think there's hardly anything you know. So what you do is you exert yourself, make them feel that, or make them know, show to them that you are just as, or even more capable than they are. And what happens in those instances like those is that that haughtiness that they exhibit before, it turns to grudging admiration. And then also adding to talking about your own protocols. For me, I like to talk about what we have in Liberia before I can go to even other parts of like even talk about the African Charter or the Maputo Protocol. It's obvious that they're going to state theirs. It's left for you to state yours. That means you have to know yours to be able to state it, you know. But you have to let them know that while it is true that you have these, you have that, you also have yours, and you also, yes, are entitled to the same space. You know, it's not like because I'm white, it's mine. No, nobody owns it. So that's that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Ade. Dr. Renifa, did you want to quickly jump in here?
Just on one aspect of the law, because I thought that was a very important question, which puts us at the intersection of the law, colonialism, reforms, cultural laws. And in my work, when I was a regional magistrate, I had a case where someone alleged during a defense after raping someone that it was cultural what he did. In their culture, you can just take a girl, go with the girl, and you have sexual intercourse with her, then you marry her. So I started interrogating the law, because each law, the law normally says there are some cultures which are barbaric. But when I called an elderly woman from that community as an expert witness, she explained in detail something to the effect that cultural law or cultural norms are very dynamic. When she was growing, the process was taken, but it's not like you just take someone, kidnap them, abduct them, and rape them. No, that is how it was written in the books by those who were literate. But the culture itself, when it was explained, it was totally different. So when I interrogate the law, I take into consideration all those factors: who wrote the law, who is interpreting it, and what century are we living in order to come to a decision. So what helps is something might be male dominated, white dominated, but I apply my mind, interrogate it, and apply even my position as a woman, because I thought, I don't want a culture where one of my children will be carried away, raped, and then married. So we are now in the 21st century. So that's how sometimes I deal with some of the issues. You deconstruct them. For example, the international humanitarian law, the concept started in 1863, developed in 1864. We are talking of protocols from 1949 to 1977. If you say I'm old, the law is very old. So I know how to actually deal with the law because I know its age and where the person who wrote is coming from. So that is some of the ways we use to rely with other normatives, which are not necessarily the law, in order to bring justice. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. This is very much connected. The next question is connected, I think, to something that Osai raised before in terms of challenges, especially within the family. But this question also is very specific to how to deal with obstacles that are caused by family members due to the fact that they're embracing bad customs, and particularly for young women lawyers in that sense. Oh, Osai, did you want to take that up? Someone else?
Okay, let me start.
Yeah.
For the question, I'm not too sure what she means or he means when they mention bad customs, because our customs, many of our customs are seen as bad. But personally, if you ask me about one, in inverted commas, bad custom in Africa, the only thing I'll think about is FGM. traditional schools have many other good things that they teach their children, not only FGM. For me, I think it is the only bad custom. So if we talk about those, how do we work around bad customs of family? The first thing is that you have to explain to them. That is why you are the enlightened person. You have to be able to explain to them, to convince them that, look, it's not all our customs are bad. There are some things that we've learned over the years, and we've appreciated learning those things over the years, and things that no book in the world is going to teach you. Yeah. So let's not see them first as bad customs. Even our, it seemed to be something good. The traditionalists who do it, in Liberia, we call them traditional mothers or zoes. They see that as something good. They think there's a reason to it, even though if it has been proven time and again that there's no good reason, but it's not, they want to be able to help their children, but it's just not working the way they think they would do it. And then it has become so desecrated, denigrated, to the point that everything they do at the bush school, for example, is wrong. No, that's not true. So what you have to do is to just advise, talk to them and tell them, look, we can still do this thing, but we only need to refine them a little bit. We just have to do it in the confines of human rights law so that we don't violate other people's rights, because yes, those things we do violate. FGM is violating the right of children. So for me, I think we just need to talk. Just need to engage in meaningful conversation.
Right. Yeah. And, thank you very much, Ade. And then there is a comment in the chat about just reiterating that, we can also speak about, in addition to obviously acknowledging bad customs that we have in the continent, including female genital mutilation, including forced and child marriage, that we can also take the space as well to talk about our good customs that we can utilize. And I think that's really where, for instance, the Maputo Protocol and some of these human rights instruments that are Africanized in a sense are being utilized to promote and advance and protect women's rights in the continent as well. And I think additionally to that question is this idea, especially around, patriarchal perceptions and patriarchy generally, especially with young women who are becoming lawyers, who are getting into the legal profession, and how, for instance, the perceptions by family members can, in a sense, be a limiting factor in that instance. I know that we're almost running out of time, and we do have a couple of questions in the chat. I will take a couple and just fuse it together as sort of like a roundup for our panelists. One was really iterating the idea around finding our tribe that emerged from our conversation, but most importantly, for instance, how do we get allies in spaces we aspire to move to? But I think also just wrapping it up as a key takeaway is this idea around how, in what practical ways can we have more women in leadership positions, in human rights and humanitarian law? How do we ensure that we create environments that hold the door open for other young women that are coming through? Osai, do we want to go with Osai? And then we have Ade, and then we wrap up with Dr. Renifa. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks, Linda and Buki, for those questions. For building your tribe, is identifying women that you want to be associated with or to appreciate. But you need to really invest in relationship building. Approaching people does not mean that they'll become allies immediately. It's also about, getting to know the person, and also, sharing and exchanging. So I would say definitely reach out, definitely try to find time to cultivate those relationships. Bearing in mind that if it tends to be a busy executive, scheduling some time to meet up will probably get you more, value for your time than just dropping the occasional hi or hello or things that you need done. With supporting women in leadership roles, increasingly, there are lots of leadership programs, because it's one thing for you to want it and to be there, to have the qualifications to be there. It's another thing to stay there. And so while allies can give some support, one thing that I have found useful is having a coach. If you are fortunate to be in an organization where they can pay for certain capacity building, rather than learning something else like to improve your subject matter expertise, you might find it better to invest in a coach if you can afford it. If you can't afford a coach, to see how you can find some online sources, and then someone that that is more than a mentor that you can play ideas with. I find that sometimes the struggles in the role is also about coaching yourself out of bad habits and cultural and stereotypical ways that you've been brought up. And for that, the extra help will definitely help in keeping women leaders there. And in terms of opening the door for others, is also about identifying early on also how to share this expertise with everyone. In the past, it used to be like, oh, if someone comes up to you, you're like, oh yes, I want you to be my mentor, you take it on. But I think now it's deliberately saying, oh, I want to share what I learned. And if there are people that are out there that are willing to receive, I'm going to find those channels like this, for example, in order to share my experience. Because someone listening today is already thinking, okay, I can aspire, I can achieve, and I have the tools in order to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Osai. Ade?
Okay, Osai has already basically covered the first part of talking about the allies, so I will talk more about the second part. Another thing we want to do is to talk to the men. Our society is patriarchal, and they're like basically call the shots, but it's because of the setting they're born into. They are born from the cradle. They are taught that they should be the head. They are the more important children. Even if it's the last son, even if your last child is the boy is the one who should be given more credence. So what I think we should do is to engage them into some meaningful dialogue with our male relatives, with our male friends, talking to them and telling them, look, this is what we need. Women are entitled to just as much rights as you have, just as much power as you have. So let's just understand. And I think if we continue talking to them, their mindsets are going to change. Here in Liberia, we have what we call he for she. And it's like most times men pushing issues of women, issues about politics, issues about rape, issues about child marriage. So when we have those issues, you find out that men are the ones who are more in the forefront, and that takes a message to other men who thinks that it should not be. If they see other men, yes, they will be encouraged to get into the fight for empowering more women and getting more women into leadership positions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ade. Dr. Renifa?
Just three things. It's communication, coordination, and also finding mentors where there is an aspect of diversity. People within the legal fraternity, people within the family network, people within the stakeholders. Most of the stakeholders are people you work with also. The majority of them. So getting a lot of synergy from there, a lot of advice from there, a lot of support from there. Then effective communication is when you really communicate effectively at all levels, starting from home, the public spheres, and also communicating frankly where you are interrogating the law and institutions about reality, because mostly we talk about abstract things. When we go to the field, you see reality. So that yawning gap, effectively communicating it, I think that is what I have pivoted my career on. And I actually think people who are upcoming might actually find a lot of mental solace and physical rest when you actually see yourself in that holistic manner, that there is a very insurmountable task. You are not going to push Kilimanjaro on your own. In Kiswahili, they say it takes all hands on the deck. it also takes different strategies. So if there are people in the academia who are researching about something which has something to do with international humanitarian law, I don't have to be an expert in that. I tap on their expertise. If there are people doing counseling, I tap on their expertise. If people are working on certain interventions, I tap on their experience. And the diversity is, I have people who are young, people who are men, people who are women, different people in different walks of life, but achieving the same common goal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Renifa, and just reiterating the idea that we don't have to work in silos, that we can build solidarity across, across our different careers, across our different areas of specialization, if you can call it that. And that, as Dr. Renifa said, there is really great value in that sort of solidarity. At this point, we really want to be respectful of time. So we're at the end of the panel. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to, as I said, our very inspiring panelists who have really shared their experiences in terms of the work that they've done, as well as the challenges and how they're navigating it. But we also wanted to thank everybody else as well for joining us today. For this panel, regard to women lawyers in the context of human rights and humanitarian law. I think a key takeaway really is this idea that we can come together as a collective to address barriers, but also to advocate for cultural change that is needed at all levels to ensure that women succeed. For more discussion on this and everything else, please do join us for the Institute's upcoming panel on women and leadership in corporate law practice on April 21st. And also join the ongoing conversation online everywhere on social media as well, to continue this conversation as we build our community, as we build conversation around women lawyers in all spheres. Do have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining us. Goodbye.